Well, welcome everyone. We are excited. I'm excited about this webinar today, Better Decisions and Better Learning, a leader's guide to smarter strategies. Before I introduce Ingenuity a little bit and also David, just a few housekeeping items. David and I mean this to be interactive. Um, and so this isn't going to be one of those webinars where we talk for 50 minutes and then you're allowed 10 minutes of questions at the end. As you have thoughts, input, where you want to tell David where he's wrong, correct him, that sort of thing. Please do that in the chat box, and or if you like, put it in the Q&A. I'll be monitoring both, so I can see your comments and questions. But we would much prefer this to be a conversation with all of you. We're excited that so many of you have joined us from many places, from the UK and well, actually, David from France and Canada and around the United States and various places. So we are, yeah, we're excited about this. Just a little bit about Ingenuity. What we do, we host these webinars. We do a lot of thought leadership webinars. I get an opportunity to learn a ton from a variety of really smart people from all different walks of life. But Ingenuity, who are we? Well, and what do? We do consulting work in and around learning, so needs analysis, gap analysis, curriculum mapping, and program marketing, learning marketing, and so on. We do a great deal of design and development work. We have developed tens of thousands of learning modules for um, mostly large companies, occasionally small organizations, from e-learning to mobile gamification, dashboards, video animation, and so on. We do an enormous amount of translation work. We've translated well over 1 billion words. We work in up to 200 languages all around the world. It's mostly translating learning content, but not always. And then we do staff augmentation, which is placing skilled L&D people, project managers, graphic design teams. Sometimes it's an individual, sometimes it's a whole team to augment your learning, training, and development team. So if you have a need, we'll be in contact, or you can be in contact with us. You can let us know. So let's move to introductions. This is way more interesting. So here's what I know about David. David and I first met after I think I had given a presentation and you had given a speech, and we were somewhere in Florida. I don't remember where, at some conference, and I honestly don't remember the conference, but I remember meeting you. And I heard your speech, and it was just fantastic. One of the more incredible stories I've ever heard. David is a graduate of the United States Naval Academy. He was top of his class, and he went on to be the captain of a nuclear sub that at the time was the poorest performing, lowest retention sub in the United States Navy. And David, you can correct everything I'm saying that's wrong, but this is what I remember. And you learned an enormous amount, and you sort of changed your leadership style given some circumstances that presented themselves to you. And under your leadership, that boat became the top performing, highest retention ship in the boat in the Navy. And so David wrote about that in a book called Turn the Ship Around. Some of you have read that. It was a bestseller, and it kind of it really launched David as a thought leader in organizational structure and organizational management, and it's had a profound influence on me. So, David, we are really honored to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for all the listeners for participating. Yeah, so Jerry, that was Vern Harnish's conference in Orlando, and then what Jerry
Oh
didn't tell
yeah.
you guys was that his company at the time then took it was I don't know how it ended up. It was like almost it was 93. I was like a 93-minute speech. I don't know how the soundtrack was that long, but he said, "Yeah, we recorded it. How about we turn it in one of those graphic videos?" And I was like, sure. I was just starting out. I had no idea. And it's been one of the most amazing things that we've got millions of views. Now I'm going to put a link in the chat for everyone to see what Jerry and his guys did way back then. So
It
we've been good friends
That's
since
the most
then.
popular thing I've ever done, David. I
Yeah.
think there's somewhere between 4 and 5 million views.
Yeah,
I always
yeah.
figured if I went viral for something, it'd probably be something not good.
Yeah,
But
no.
this was a good thing. So this
Yeah.
is and so David recently released a book. Was it August? I think it came out.
Yeah, last month.
Yep, last month, and called Distancing, which is in the image there. You see, is he's holding that, and I don't know if that's AI generated or not, but you look good in the photo, so congratulations on that. But I've David was kind enough to send me an advanced copy, and I had an opportunity to read through it several times, and that's going to be the topic of what we're going to talk about today. And just to give you a little bit of an idea of the flow of this conversation. Um, we're going to talk about David's motivation for writing the book Distancing, and then what's the problem that you and your co-author were attempting to address. And then there's three big parts to the book. It's be someone else in using distancing to make good decisions, be somewhere else to make good decisions, and then be some time else in a different time frame. Um, so that's the flow of our conversation today. And but let's start, David, with motivation. I read the book enough that I'm seeing this stuff in my sleep, right? But I just grabbed some quotes out of here, and two of the quotes that really struck me are as follows. This book is meant to be a roadmap to ensure that key decisions are correctly made, that they're thoughtful decisions, intentional decisions, and that they're aligned with long-term success. They show us how distancing allows leaders to rise above the immediate pressures in their lives, to see the broader landscape and enabling clarity in the face of complexity. Wonderful phrase at the end. And then secondly, why slowing down matters, slowing down to create space for deeper thinking. And this pause is not meant to be an interruption or a waste of time, but it turns out that pausing, slowing down, thinking deliberately, distancing, those things are powerful tools for clarity and creativity. So you and Michael Gillespie wrote this together. David, what motivated you? What more do you want to say about these quotes or additional motives you want to talk about?
Yeah, so as a submarine commander, um, and the story of turn the ship around, in essence, is I refused to give orders, and we used language. We changed the language so that the officers came to me and told me what they intended to do. In other words, I got the officers to not only make decisions, but take action on their decisions. There was a bias for action inherent in the language and what we did on the submarine. And that was a great story. But there were some parts that, of course, didn't make it into the book that I didn't really understand or just we didn't have room for. And this is one of the ones that I didn't really understand. When the officers came to me and they told me what they intended to do, they were almost always spot on. They came up with something that was good, better than what I thought of, or something. But and they owned it. That was a brilliant part of it. It's like no matter what, they couldn't say, "Hey, the boss told me I knew it was screwed up. I did it anyway." Because they came to me and said, "I intend to submerge. I intend to service. I intend to start the reactor. I intend to load torpedoes." And so that was sort of the magic of the book. But every once in a while, an officer would come. Let's say it was the engineer, and he would come to me with an idea. Say, "Well, I got this problem, so I intend to solve it by doing ABC." And it would strike me as a solution optimized for the engineering department, but not for the submarine as a whole.
Hmm.
And when you get faced with that, I could say no, I could redirect them, but I tried asking different questions. I didn't like Socratic questioning. I didn't like saying things like, "Well, did you think about this?" Because that's sort of like basically a passive aggressive way of saying, "I want you to think
Duh.
more." about this. So I try not to do it. It annoyed me when people did that to me. So I vowed not to do that. But here was a question that really worked well. It was sort of accidental. One day, the engineer came to me and it's like, and I said, sit here. And I had him like sit in my chair, in the captain's chair. And I said, I'm going to get a cup of coffee. When I come back, I want you to tell me what you would do if you were me. And I was literally gone for 30 seconds. And I came back, and the words come in his mouth are totally different. And now he's talking as if he were the captain. He didn't consult with his team. He didn't review the blueprints once again. He didn't study the technical. He just thought about the problem from a different perspective. Another trick I used was I started on me for this one because I had to make a lot of decisions about how we were going to deal with issues on the submarine. And I had a calendar that was always set 6 months in the future, and I always imagined myself on that day. I, it was more than just thinking, oh, how is this going to affect the future 6 months from now? It was like I would actually try and picture myself 6 months from now, and then talk to me of today. And I'd say, David, what you need to do here is blah 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 blah. And was always better because the 6 months in the future self is is pure to your values, not constrained by all the
Mhm.
business of what you're doing today. And they're going to come up with a better longer term, fix it once and be done with it solution than if you're just trapped in today, you may come up with some short-term fix that kind of gets you through the day. And so I started using that on my officers too. So number one is you want people to think, and decision making is the currency of thinking. But number two, you want them to make good decisions. And so that was the genesis for this book because I didn't really understand why these questions worked and a whole bunch of other questions, which I tried and rejected, didn't work until about 10 years later. And I hooked up with Dr. Michael Gillespie, who was a PhD in psychology. And I got connected with him because I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal, which said, which was interesting to me. I always like these psychology articles, and I was why humans do what they do. And then it says authored by Dr. Michael Gillespie, who was at USF in Tampa, which is like right up the road from where I'm. So, oh my gosh, this guy's like right. So we got together, and then we started talking about decision making. And I had this question for him, and so he kind of explained it to me. And basically the answer is the biggest problem to our decision making is us. That's a simplistic, that's a shortcut way of saying it. Really, the biggest
Mhm.
problem in our decision making is that we view the decision from the perspective of us being us. And as a result, there's all these biases, and you can look up charts of human biases and go from 30 to 240 or so. But when you really boil it down, a large number of these biases, escalation of commitment, sunk cost fallacy, risk aversion, are rooted in the fact that we simply view the thing from our immersed self, which is the idea that it's the I me self that you
Mhm.
just naturally live in. If I ask you, how was your day? I had a good day. What'd you have for breakfast? I had eggs for breakfast. How was your drive to work? Someone cut me off. So it's an I me world, and this is just how we are. You write in your journal. I'm dealing with an issue. I'm dealing with an issue. Where the most important word here is I, me, because that's the perspective from which you view all these things. And
Mhm.
there's implications for that. And when it comes to decision making, they distort the way you see the world and they distort the way you calculate your decisions. And it's the biggest issue in decision making.
Yeah, it is. So a lot of people on today are learning and development. Some HR people are on today too. There is more and more and more pressure. And the quote here, distancing allows leaders to rise above immediate pressures. There's the pressure of new technology like AI, which is changing our entire industry and how we operate, right? And then there's pressure to demonstrate how new techniques, new learning translates into ROI, right? And then there's how many people do you need on your team? And so L&D people are constantly making decisions. The pressure often is not placed on them by themselves. The pressure is external to them. And so most people that are in L&D are fairly harried under some fairly significant amount of pressure, also in many cases justifying their existence. Just why do we need you, right? You don't produce more widgets. And so that pressure that pressure component is pretty significant. And I we got it here somewhat in the slowing down, but I want to examine the it from a little bit different perspective. So let's move on to sort of the problem. You've started to describe it, David, and I think this quote helped me. When excited, stressed, or threatened, right? So those are the excited stress part is internal, but it's usually in response to an external stimuli. We're pushed further into ourselves. Pressure doesn't cause us to think more broadly, it causes us to think more narrowly. You get that closed in feeling of me here now,
Yeah.
and that narrows, filters, distorts what we see. It reinforces whatever silly thing we were doing before. Certainly
Yeah.
doesn't help us think through this. So talk us through some components of this quote.
We've all felt this. And this is the feeling you have when things feel very intimate and very immediate, and you just have to respond. And we've all said things, someone said something, and you immediately responded, and then you immediately said, yeah, I probably didn't need to say that. That's the feeling. That's this immersed self. Now we normally live in an immersed self state. That it's the me here now. That's the viewpoint from which I experience the world from some place a little bit behind my eyes, up here in my prefrontal cortex. That's ground. That's zero, and I measure things from there, and I view things from there, and time starts right now. And there are certain things that will push us deeper into that immersed state, in which case we have this narrowing of perspective. We don't hear other voices, and it makes us less able to be calm. We're, we feel we sometimes describe it as being I was triggered or stressed out. If you're being evaluated, especially if it's public or it's important. There's a story in the book about a pilot who's being evaluated
Oh yeah.
landing an airplane.
This,
And
by the way,
so
was troubling, but go on.
yeah. So anytime anytime you're receiving feedback, especially if it's critical feedback, or you're going in for your annual review and you don't like your boss, he's like, oh, what's this going to be? So these are situations when you're likely to be pushed more into this immersed state. You get cut off, anything unexpected, anything that feels like it's a slight to you. You get cut off in traffic. Someone turns around on the airplane aisle with a big backpack that they're unaware of how big they are, knocks you pretty good. Like again, these are moments when you're going to drop. Can I give you some feedback that will trigger this more immersed state? We tell a story. Andy Grove and Gordon Moore, who were running Intel at the time in the early 80s, were in this immersed state. They were making memory chips, and they had memory chips were losing margin because the Asian manufacturers were coming in and commoditizing the market. And so Intel posted a loss in the early 80s, and they were making this at the same time they're making this 4004 microprocessor. And it seemed like the future was in microprocessors, but for a year they couldn't decide. And
Yeah.
Grove described it. He says, we were memory chips. I mean, our identity was memory chips. Memory chips were us, and we were memory chips. Not just me personally and Gordon, but the company. And then one day Grove says, and that's describing the immersed That's what it
Yeah.
feels like to be immersed. It's like I identify with the thing. The thing is me. You criticize the thing, you criticize me. My idea is my thing. My idea is me. You criticize my idea, you criticize me. That's what it feels like. And more, and Grove says the more one day, they were kind of frustrated because they for a year they were just in this
Frozen.
stasis. They weren't deciding. And then he says, "Hey, what if we got fired and they brought in new people to run the company? What would they do?" And Gordon Moore says, instantly. Instantly, he says, well, they would get out of memory chips and they would shift over to microprocessors. Instantly, because the goggles are lifted, because now it's not you making the decision. At this and up to this point, their brains were being forced to make the decision that everything they'd done over the last 15 years to build a company was somehow wrong. I mean, it wasn't wrong. It was that got them there. But the brain wants to prove that whatever you're doing is right. So it curates the way you see reality and the way you process decisions to support that. You climb all the way up
Yeah.
Everest, you're 150 yards from the summit, you pass your cutoff time, but you keep going and then you don't make it down. That's what happens to teams. Why? Because you know everything that went into getting you there. Your
Mhm.
brain was there, carried along. But if you called your brother who wasn't with you and said, "Hey, I'm at the situation here. We passed the cutoff time, but we're not quite at the summit. What should I do?" Say, "Turn around, you idiot. People die up there."
Right. Yeah.
Why? The external view can see it. And
Yeah.
so that's the mindset that you want to have. It's not, you don't live your life out there, but when you get to critical times, you jump out and you view it as if you were your coach. Like, don't view it as if you're on the field playing football, you're the quarterback, you got sacked, you're sweaty, you're dirty, you're tired, you're hurt, you're bruised, you're whatever, you're calling the plays. That's how most of us view our lives. But every once in a while, just hyperspace yourself over to the bleachers, be about a third of the way up the bleachers, have a little bit of perspective that, oh, there's 22 guys on the field.
Hmm.
You're just one of them. Oh,
That
that sack's gonna hurt. But they didn't feel it. So
right.
they're seeing things more clearly than you are. And you can just imagine it works. This is the magic bullet superpower of the thing, which is I wish I learned this 60 years ago. You just need to imagine it
Hmm.
and you get the benefits. Just imagine you're somebody else. You're your kids, you're your boss, you're your board, you're the clients, you're the neighborhood, you're 7 generations from now, with whatever.
Yeah.
And then advise, then coach yourself.
And
And
we'll
better.
come into that. We'll come into that in a little bit. It's profoundly important. And again, for most people in our call, you could disagree with me in the chat box if you want, but I think most of us see that learning development, HR skills, the, bigger than that, the whole economy is changing. The economy is changing because of politics. The economy is changing because of AI solutions. And you get a handful of people who are very forward thinking. But most of us are going to stay in the direction that we're going because we've been going in that direction for 10 or 20 or some of us 30 years.
Yeah.
And we don't know anything else. Um, it's profoundly important to and then we don't see in the way you're describing things, we don't see opportunities, we see threats. Things are threatening to us, um, not as opportunities, and that's a real challenge. So, David, you've kind of started on. Well, I want to just before we move on, just address the what's the risk of a wrong decision, what's the risk of a hurried decision, and what's the risk of decision paralysis, which is what you describe in Intel, right? Those guys have spent a year. They're very smart people. They cannot they cannot get out of their own way until they decide to get out of their own way. Any other thoughts on the risk, bad decisions, hurried decisions, decision paralysis before we move on?
Yeah, I think of this mostly in terms of helping us in our personal lives. You all are having to make decisions, quit a job, start a company, retire, do something different. And the risk of wrong decisions, often we don't even realize there's a decision to be made. We just kind of, like you said, Jerry, we just keep doing the same thing. The risk is we have regrets or at
Mm,
the end of our life where we say, why didn't I? Why didn't I when I when I had that layover in Seattle, take an extra day and go see my friend? Why didn't I um, stop what I was doing and do something different? Why didn't whatever it is? And and then at the end of our life, we regret those roads that we didn't take because
yeah.
today's world, anyone who's watching this is it's probably pretty safe for them. They're not going to get eaten by a lion or something. So when your brain conjures up all these fears and wants you to keep doing what you're doing because it knows it's safe. You're still alive. So that's winning. Like
Mm,
you
yeah.
you you don't need to do something bold. But in today's world, you just probably for most of us, we hold ourselves back. And my hope is that people live bigger, bolder lives, and at the end of their lives, they have
Hmm.
fewer regrets. They don't say, "Oh yeah, I wish I did this, that. I wish I lived a life truer to myself," which is the number
Yeah.
one regret
Yeah.
recorded by Bronnie Ware in Top Five Regrets of the Dying. Your future self is more sees more clearly what you want than your current self because your current self is constrained by all the everything that's happening right now and today. Oh yeah, I'm watching this webinar, but I'm watching at 1 1/4 speed because I got to get through it because I got to do this other thing, or I
Mm,
got to pay rent, or I got to whatever have a meeting, or I got to whatever it happens to be, and so you're compromised. But if you said, well, 6 months from now, what do I wish I'd done? Or when I'm 80, thinking back to today, what do I wish I did today?
yeah.
How do I wish I spend my time?
Yeah.
When you're 80, it's going to be, when you imagine, make that mental leap, you're not thinking, oh, and by the way, I'm still going to have to pay a mortgage and all that kind of stuff. All that falls away. And so now your brain just focuses on what's really
Yeah.
important to me.
Essentials. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
you make decisions based on what's important to you,
Yeah.
not compromised. And
So,
we need to make compromises. We got to pay rent and that kind of stuff. But when it comes to the big things, we can do a lot better with living true, honest lives and being bolder in how we live.
yeah. Just some comments here, Jay. Thank you for your comments. You know, the see the future possible. Um, really hard to do. And the more pressure there is, the more challenges there are, the more threats there are, the harder it is to do that. And Mike, thanks for sharing this on the Amazon practices. They use this. Mike put a link in the chat box. So take a look at that if you can. So David, let's move on to the first big one. You've kind of introduced it already. Um, be, be somebody. This is part of the beauty of having a coach, right?
Yes,
You know, when you
exactly.
first hear about a coach, you go, what in the world do you need? I've had a variety of different formal coaches, and I would call them informal coaches, just wise people that say, you might want to think about it from this. So, just some quotes from the book. Detach yourself from your existing paradigm, and one of the ways that you do that is not just seeking external coaches, but then you've got this interesting concept. And at first I thought maybe you might be psychotic, but distance talk, right? Distanced self talk, your future self talking to your present self invites a psychological difference, right? More open, more curious, you become more challenge seeking. And that shapes all the facets of your life, which is kind of what you've been talking about. It impacts learning, it impacts decision making and performance and relationships and just overall general sense of happiness and satisfaction. So talk us through, you've started to talk us through the why of be somebody else, but then how do you do that? Because in the book, you've got some really specific ways of doing that, of being your own coach, which at first blush, I would look at and go, wait a minute, I can't be my own coach. I'm the
Yeah.
problem. How, I need somebody else. The last guy I need to talk to is me. So
Yeah.
walk us through that.
You do it through language. So,
Mm,
for example, you are running a marathon. You can either I don't know about you guys, but I'm when I'm doing these and just distance things, I end up with a mental dialogue with myself, and a lot of it's like, well, why are you doing it?
mhm.
But
Hopefully not out loud in a grocery store,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
anyway.
So,
Yeah.
so you say, I can do it. I can do it. Okay. Or you could say, you can do it. You can do it. Well, it turns
Hmm.
out saying you can do it is better than saying I can do it. And there's a study we cite in the book where athletes were tested on these just saying these two different things to themselves, and the you can do it went further, and they
Mm.
reported less perceived exertion. Why does this work? Because I can do it. It's simply pushing yourself more. It's more representation of this immersed self. It's like, I can do, oh, I'm in so much pain. Oh, my legs hurt so much. I am like, that's me versus you can do it. That's what a supportive onlooker or supportive friend or your coach would tell you. Hey, David, you can do it. You could say, David can do it. You can do it. And so now you're receiving external um, you're receiving juice from the outside, and you don't want to let coach down. Even though coach is just another imaginary part of your brain, the fact that you're simply saying you can do it, since it sounds like what your coach would tell you, creates a sense of, oh, I don't want to let coach down. So
So it's internally generated, but externally experienced, as if it's coming from someone wholly other than self.
yeah, but even if you just change your language, you don't need a
Okay.
picture. For me, a very powerful mental picture is to shift the picture from uh, when I'm in the middle of something, like giving a speech or maybe even this podcast or um, I don't know,
Writing a book.
yeah, writing a book. You got to be in, you got to be in it a lot of the time. But if you start to feel like it becomes too performative and that you become captured by looking good rather than being good, then you got to jump out and you got to refocus the objective back onto, hey, I'm here to write a book. I'm here to
Yeah.
make a good presentation, and it's better when it's coming from your coach. So I imagine instead of being on the field like the quarterback of a football team with a helmet
Mhm.
on and looking through the grill and getting hit and that kind of stuff, I imagine myself as the coach who's sitting over there on the sidelines looking, and I imagine them a little bit elevated. So they're kind of looking down and out
Mhm.
me, and they see the perspective of the whole field, and I'm one player, and they can see what I'm doing, and they're like, yeah. And they're just calmer and they're focused.
Mhm.
They're not hung up with what just happened. They're hung up on what should we do next. And
Yeah.
the, and I just jump out there and then I jump back into what I'm at. It just
Okay.
calms you and refocuses you. And because your brain, when it's under stress and pressure, the immersed self wants you to look good.
Yeah.
So in the case of the pilot flying the airplane, which crashed, the tail broke off and three people were killed as it came into San Francisco. When he was interviewed afterwards, they're landing lights that went from four white to four red, indicating that they were dropping very quickly and that they were below glide slope. He never saw four red. How could he never see it? His brain blocked it because everyone knew if you got four red, you were going to fail your evaluation. It's key. He was being evaluated to be
On
promoted to
him.
777. Yeah, so that's a key part of it.
Yeah.
and he was afterwards, he said, well, they asked him something like, well, what were you thinking at this point in the bubble and the approach? He's like, I was worried about failing I was worried that I was going to fail my evaluation because if I got the four red, the word was that you fail your evaluation. Think about that. You got
Yeah,
302 people on an airplane flying at 150 miles an hour, approaching the end of San Francisco runway, and he's worried about passing his evaluation. He didn't say, I'm worried about landing the airplane safely with all 302 souls on board.
right.
But that's what happens. It happens
Yeah.
to all of us. And your brain gets hijacked from doing good, landing the plane, to, oh, looking good, I want to pass my evaluation. And so the way it chooses what to pay attention to in the environment is supporting this goal, not this goal. And so
Yeah.
it screws up your performance. And so you got to jump out. And the time to do it was ahead.
Hmm.
The time to do it is like when as they were approaching. And if you read the transcript on this on the flight recorder, there's these long periods of silence. And I'm just like, why didn't someone say what's going on? How come we're going dropping so fast? It's on like no one's saying that. Hey, I need some
Hmm.
help. It's not
Yeah.
coming out because
Yeah.
it was deeply, deeply, deeply in this immersed self.
And so people in the L&D world, David, we exist for the benefit of others, right? We don't increase the performance of the organization or its how productive it is. We're actually sort of below the surface. We're helping the people that do the stuff that produces the stuff to make it better, to do it faster, to do it smarter, to help them solve problems. And so L&D people, I think very often at the very beginning of their careers are very otherly focused. Over time, you start thinking more and more about your team. And then you start thinking about yourself, especially there's a lot of threats to people in this industry right now. And I don't know if I'm going to have a job. I don't know, right? Is AI going to replace me? Is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? And I think it's relatively easy to forget why we're here. And the pilot is there to safely deliver 302 souls. We we might be in a stage, and again, some of you can jump into chat and discuss this, but we might be in a state where we're more in all the arrows are pointing inward to team and self and career rather than pointing out. And I agree. Once you make that shift, well, then you're in more trouble than, than than the threat. You're actually your own biggest threat at that particular point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess I sort of feel like I'm in the L&D business myself, and I can tell you what happened to me is I was a submarine commander, and that was cool. I had a great experience, and that was amazing. And then I wrote a book as an engineer, which was uh, a long process, but in any event, um, unexpectedly a big hit. And so now I'm going around giving speeches. Well, there's no reason why a guy who was a former submarine commander and an engineer and kind of a geeky, introverted kid should ever be good at giving speeches. And I didn't have anything invested in these speeches. I just went out and had fun, like the one you you were at, and I just told my story. And when people came up to me afterwards, says, "Oh, can I give you some feedback?" I was like, "Sure, yeah, bring it on." Like I don't know anything about doing this stuff. Well, 1,000 speeches later, someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, can I give you some feedback?" I'm like, "No." How many speeches? Like
Let me tell you what
I'll
you're about to
say,
tell me.
yeah, look, I will say, sure, and I'll pretend to be interested, but inside my body is like, my brain is like, it'll come up with a whole bunch of reasons why this person doesn't, especially if it's
Yeah,
like, negative, and I'll try and smile and be interested, but I'm really not interested.
no.
And
And therefore you're not learning.
yeah, therefore I'm not learning. But maybe then I'm on the airplane, I'm like, yeah, maybe that guy had a point about something. Anyway, But it wasn't until like at the beginning I was fine. I was all, and then so I kind of was noticed halfway through that this shift seemed to be happening. I started getting allergic to feedback, which of course is death. So you can't do
Yeah.
that. But this distancing really helps you because now I say, sure, David loves feedback. Like you're not talking to me. Like I don't, I hate feedback, but David loves feedback.
Again, we're on the edge of some sort of psychosis here, but go ahead.
No, 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 it's not psychosis. There's examples of
Sure.
famous people using this when there's
Absolutely.
stressed out. Anne Hathaway tells a story when she was doing the filming of Les Mis and the I Dreamed a Dream scene where she set it up because she kind of gave permission to herself to call a halt on stage, but then she says something. She talks to herself in the third person in this scene. In this, they start rolling. She says, "No, no, no, stop." She stops it, and then she talks to herself in the third person. Simone Biles did this also when her
Yeah.
famous point where she said, "Chill, chill, Simone, sit down." And she's talking to
Yeah.
she didn't say, "Oh, I need to sit down." She says, "Chill, Simone." So
Yeah.
in very emotional, traumatic situations, your brain will automatically kind of make the shift.
Yeah.
You can control it, and you can do
Yeah.
this. Basically, it's like doing a um, self-triggered out-of-body experience.
Hmm. Hmm.
And you don't live your life there, but just jump out, look at the situation, think about how you look from the outside, then jump back, decide what you're going to do, then go back in, do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredibly helpful. And just highlighting your point about language, how just subtle shifts in language. Because we all talk to ourselves. It's just how and the perspective. Um, I want to move on to be somewhere else. I found this to be incredibly helpful. Um, and it is really, I tried to sum it up here, but it's sort of learning to zoom out, moving your perspective, and then you've got this idea of mentally moving to the balcony or becoming a fly on the wall,
Yeah.
taking that coach's perspective. Walk us through that.
Yeah. So being someone, the whole thing is basically psychologically distancing yourself from your own center of ego or consciousness of however you think about it. And one way to do it is temporarily, or in other words, with time, like be your future self, or spatially, where you say, "Hey, if I'm a fly on the wall, or I'm sitting in the balcony looking at me," and
Hmm.
these are things that come up in studies, or the balcony thing is something that came up in a couple different places, but one was with cricket team where a guy was a cricketer, kind of world stage cricketer, British guy, and he noticed that when he was at bat. Now, cricket is a game where they're entirely around you. It's not like baseball where they're kind of out, so it's you're kind of even more
Intimate. Yeah.
surrounded. And he noticed he was always felt stressed and rushed when he was at bat. But then we would go up in the balcony and look down at the next guy, and he was like, "Hey, you got time? Relax."
Mm,
And it was like the advice he was giving him, the next batter, was totally different from what was going on in his own head. So, long story short, is when his cricket career was over, he became a psychologist, and so he became a sports psychologist, and now he started coaching. He was the psychology coach for the cricket teams, and he ended up coming up with a thing called balcony boy, which was
hmm.
what, like when you're standing there and you're holding the bat, like not when the pitch is coming, but like zoom out mentally, be on the balcony and assume that posture and calm yourself that way, and then focus on what you're trying to do. And it worked. So, and Bill Urey also does it as a Harvard negotiation expert. He's in tough negotiation. You're sitting across the table. It's a perfect time to be immersed and just like, oh, it's about me and my positions.
Right.
That I can't give away that position because that position now is part of me. And just like go up to the balcony and like, what am I really trying to achieve here?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Bill.
so it's this um, seeing yourself from an out of body experience. We had a couple out of body stories. We had to take them out because they were deemed to be too traumatic, basically, for the average reader, which I didn't really think they were. But shifting to an out of body experience is your brain's solution to overly traumatic. It's already
Mhm.
something your brain does on its own if it really needs to. But here's a sense where you summon up your own out of body experience.
Yeah, and Bill Urey is an interesting case. For those not familiar with him, he is a world-class negotiator. He's the guy that's negotiating between companies, often between nations, often with the involvement of the UN. And so he's the guy in the middle, and there's two sides, right? There's two conflicting sides, and the conflict is sometimes violent and bloody. Um, and the perspective, I often think of people in conflict. When you're in conflict with somebody, you want to win, right? You want to go point for point. You don't want to concede anything, and you want to win every single point. And I think part of what Bill does, and part of what you're talking about, David, is removing yourself, and all of a sudden you go, that's a pretty small thing. To your point earlier, when you blurt something out later on, you go, oh man, I shouldn't have said that. I owe somebody an apology. But especially when you're under pressure, you're in conflict, pulling yourself out of that and looking at it from a distance, it's amazing how obvious the silly becomes. This is really silly what I'm fighting over right now. Um, or this is really silly that this is the hill I'm willing to die on. I think it changes the perspective quite a bit. Just moving out and looking back in, because that's essentially what you're describing.
Well,
Is
the key is here's how I think about it. Every time you make a decision, or every time you walk in with these are our points, or this is our position, or I made a decision to start a company, or stop a company, or hire a person, or land the airplane, or whatever it is, that these things now stick to you or stick to your ego. They become part of your ego. Your ego now
mm,
has to defend this. And the more and more decisions you make as you go through life, it's got more and more territory. And so it's not so much that it's defending this decision, it's that this decision to make memory chips, it's you.
mm,
It's not, it's defending you. It's the same instincts that make you alert for something moving towards you more than something moving away from you, because something moving at you is going to be more likely a threat than something moving away from you. And so your brain's going to process these things like, this is important, this is a threat, I got to defend this because it's part of me. That's the feeling that you break when you say, well, I don't like feedback, but David loves feedback, because you're now talking
hmm.
about some guy who's on stage whose name happened to be shares mine.
Right, right, yeah. All right. Well, we've only got a couple minutes left, and I just want to touch base quickly on the last paradigm, because it's part of the book. It's an important one. We've touched on it. So when we imagine ourselves as our future selves, we automatically become somebody else, because when you move the time frame, you're saying you move the person. Also, this future self is different than me, and
Yeah.
that person has a highly valuable viewpoint, a perspective that's I liked how you said it before. Your future self is going to be more consistent with the values that you hold,
Your
because
future self is more
they're not
like your ideal self. Yeah.
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 Yeah, you're not under that, the future self isn't under the tyranny of the urgent at the particular moment. In other
Exactly.
words, our future self is a better version of ourselves, of us. Talk us through that a little bit in the time we have left.
Well, this is a long known psychological phenomenon that when humans think about their future selves, they tend to think of it sort of as a different person, not a continuity of me. This is why we don't eat right. We treat our bodies badly. We don't save enough for retirement and things like that because we know, of course, logically it's me, but it doesn't really feel like me. That feels like somebody else. Well, you can use this to your advantage because one of the you when you jump out and you separate yourself from your center of consciousness, you want it to feel like it's somebody else because you don't want to feel like that judgment is passing on you. So when someone comes up to you and says, "Can I give you some feedback?" Say, "Sure." David loves feedback. Or you can imagine my future self thinking back to today is, okay, do I not want feedback and then I'll just be the same and never any better? Or do I want feedback? Because feedback is the path to improvement and learning and growth.
Yeah.
So your future self will say, yeah, yeah, yeah. Your future self loves feedback. The guy who just walked off stage doesn't. So
No, no,
don't
I'm
be the
not.
guy who
Yeah.
just walked off stage. Be your future self. And
Yeah.
so, and there's a moment. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but like there's a moment I really try and put it all out there when I'm on stage. And you come off stage and you're exhausted and you're like mentally done everything you can, and you're sort of coming back to reality. And of course, there's that one person like right there somehow got there, and they're like, you're not even, and then they're like hitting you with something,
Mm.
and it's a bad time to be in that. Don't be the
Hmm.
person coming off stage. And so I'll like, when I'm done, I'll say, okay, it's tomorrow. I'll deliberately kind of frame it as like I'm already in tomorrow. And okay, so now what happens? A person comes up, hey, can I give you some? Yeah, sure, it's tomorrow. Like,
Yeah. I
uh,
love it. I uh, face some version of that a lot, and so I'm going to try it
yeah,
because you are tired and you are annoyed,
yeah,
and really
yeah,
what you want is to go somewhere quiet and
yeah,
silent.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yeah.
want.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, David, thank you for your time. Just a couple more things here. Um, this paradigm, we will send you um, and here's a QR code for the book if you want to pick that up. So we encourage you. I encourage you to do that because it's been incredibly helpful to me. And give it a read. We will send you a recording of this during in the next, I think, 24 hours or so. We'll get it out to you pretty quick. And then you can have a recording. Feel free to share it with your team. Feel free to share it with other people in your organization. And it's a great thing. We've got another webinar coming up. It's in November. It's going to be with Dr. Frank Gonzalez, who's the head of cultural engagement. He's an interesting guy. He's worked for Yum Brands. He's worked Taco Bell, but really talking about not just slices of learning, but how to build an organization where you learn and where the culture actually embraces learning. So you can sign up with the QR code. We'll send you some registration information on that coming up. Most importantly, David, thank you. I always enjoy a conversation with you and seeing you again. And just thanks for your book. Thanks for your insights and thanks for your friendship.